Today, you become a member of a Wenzhou property speculation team. I started out from a tiny leather shoe workshop, caught the wave of the times, gathered a crew to sweep up apartments across the whole country, and rolled a handful of cash into tower after tower of empty buildings. I was born in Longwan, Wenzhou, into a poor family. My father mended leather shoes his whole life, and our whole family crowded into 3 rooms of an old wooden house with a leaking roof, scraping by on his craft. When I was 7, the reform and opening up had just begun. Overnight, the streets filled with people setting up small stalls, and my mother too took up a shoulder pole and began selling buttons and sewing thread. My mother told me that a Wenzhou person has no backer and can only rely on nerve. She said that even earning a single cent was better than guarding the old wooden house waiting for pie to fall from the sky. When I was 10, I started running errands delivering shoes for my father, carrying shoe boxes through every street and lane of Wenzhou, and gradually I learned which streets had the people most willing to spend. In those years, private little workshops were everywhere in Wenzhou. The neighbor who made lighters built a new house in a single year, and for the first time I understood that the bold ones get to eat meat. At 15, I dropped out of school to take over my father's shoe stall. By day, I worked the sewing machine making shoe uppers, and by night, I pedaled a tricycle to deliver the finished goods to the wholesale market. At 20, I started my own small shoe factory, hired 7 or 8 fellow townsmen, and even earning just 2 yuan a pair, I dared to take orders for tens of thousands of pairs. I sold my shoes to the Northeast and the Northwest, shipping them out by the whole railway wagon load, and over a few years I had saved up the first real cash of my life. In 1998, the old rule of work units allocating housing was abolished. Cities began selling commercial apartments, and for the first time I heard that houses too could be bought and sold like shoes. That year I used the money earned from making shoes to buy my first commercial apartment in downtown Wenzhou, over 300,000 yuan, and my relatives all said I was throwing my hard-earned blood money into the water. To my surprise, in less than 2 years that apartment doubled in value. I flipped it and earned more than 3 years of running the shoe factory, and my heart suddenly came alive. I handed the shoe factory over to my younger brother to run, and carrying cash myself, I haunted the sales offices every day, lining up at the very front of any opening to book several units in one breath. I learned to mortgage one apartment at the bank, then use the loan money to buy the next one, and the apartments in my hands rolled larger and larger like a snowball. By 2001, I already held more than a dozen apartments, and in Wenzhou more and more people like me were turning their fortunes around through housing, so everyone began to band together. In the autumn of 2001, a dozen of us Wenzhou townsmen pooled over 10 million in cash, chartered a coach, and charged toward Shanghai, forming the first apartment viewing squad. The moment we walked into a sales office, we asked how many units were left, and whatever number they gave, we bought the lot, leaving the sales clerk so frightened by these Wenzhou people she could barely speak. In those years, our viewing squad fought its way from Shanghai to Hangzhou and Beijing, and in every city the developers sent people to the airport holding placards to whisk us away. The media called us the Wenzhou property speculation team. The newspapers chased after us daily, saying that wherever we went, the housing prices there would shoot up by a great leap. My wife joined in too, several Wenzhou women sitting in a cafe, leafing through glossy property brochures, and in a single afternoon, they would settle deals for over 100 apartments. In 2004, I bought an entire floor of Lakeview Apartments by West Lake in Hangzhou, and standing on the balcony looking at the city ablaze with lights, I felt the whole city beneath my feet was mine. I closed the shoe factory for good, printed only the 2 words property flipper on my business card, drove an imported luxury car, and even rebuilt the ancestral hall back home into a 3-story Western-style mansion. The year 2007 was the maddest of all. An apartment listed in the morning rose by the afternoon, and the paper net worth of the 100-odd apartments in my hands surged past 200 million. Bank relationship managers lined up to invite me to dinner. Developers reserved the best floors for me before any opening, as if all the money in the world was chasing after me. Back then, I believed prices would keep rising forever, So I borrowed high-interest private loans to add leverage, betting my entire fortune on the last few dozen new units I had taken on. In 2010, the wind suddenly shifted. The cities issued a new rule that one household could buy only one home, and the 100-odd apartments in my hands abruptly stopped selling. In 2011, the purchase restrictions tightened ever further. Outsiders wanting to buy had to first pay several years of social insurance, and the apartments I had listed with agents went half a year without a single inquiry. The bank mortgage payments and interest I owed each month came to nearly $2 million, but the rent could not even cover a fraction of it, and the cash in my account drained away bit by bit. To keep things turning, I began robbing Peter to pay Paul, borrowing new high-interest loans to repay the old ones, the interest rising another notch each time, and the hole I was filling only grew larger. In the autumn of 2011, Wenzhou's private lending chain began to snap. Several of my fellow speculator townsmen fled one after another, and the creditors brought their phone calls right to my doorstep. My wife urged me to cut prices early and dump the apartments to break even, but I could not bear to, always thinking that if I held on a little longer the wind would turn back around. But the prices did not wait for me. The listing price fell again and again with no taker, and the bank managers who had once scrambled to invite me to dinner stopped answering my calls one by one. I ran to every agency entrusting the apartments to them, dropping the price below even what I had paid. Yet in the cold, deserted sales offices, I could not find a single person come to view. In early 2012, the bank's payment due notices turned into court summonses. The first apartments I had defaulted on were sealed and prepared for auction, and I could not sleep at night. Only then did I understand that the leverage that once turned one apartment into 10 was a pair of wings when prices rose. But the moment prices fell, it became a rope tightening around my neck. In 2012, most of the apartments under my name were auctioned off one by the court to pay debts. The auction prices so low they pained my heart, yet the debt still could not be cleared. I sold the imported luxury car, surrendered the rebuilt village mansion to the creditors, and my wife took the gold bracelet from her wrist and quietly placed it into the repayment bag. The townsmen who once lined up to invite me to dinner now walked around me when they saw me. Some said behind my back that I had played a winning hand into ruin, and hearing it, I could only smile bitterly. By 2013, my assets had nearly evaporated, from a paper net worth of over $200 million to owing the creditors several tens of millions when it was all tallied up in the end. Through the hardest days, I hid in the old wooden house back home, not daring to go out, listening to the creditors knocking at the door, as if drifting back to the poverty of my childhood. My father walked in leaning on his cane and pressed into my hands the few tens of thousands he had saved from mending shoes his whole life, saying that so long as a person is willing to work, he will not starve. In that moment, I suddenly recalled my mother's words, that a Wenzhou person has no backer and can only rely on nerve, but nerve used in the wrong place becomes the pit that buries you. I sat down with the creditors and negotiated debt by debt, signed an installment repayment agreement, and once again began peddling that dust-covered old sewing machine to make shoes. Over the next 10 years, I rose early and toiled late rebuilding the real business, started the shoe factory up again bit by bit, and repaid most of the debt one installment at a time. I held on to the last apartment I lived in myself, the very first one I had ever bought, and no matter how the market shifted, I could never bring myself to sell it. Today, young people in the city again rush into sales offices clutching their savings, the light in their eyes exactly like mine back then, and standing beside them I watch, lost for words. My wife often says it was fortunate we never truly fled the debt. With the debt repaid, the heart settled too. Far better than lying awake, clutching $200 million all those years ago. I tell my grandson about my property flipping days, telling him that everyone wants to ride the wave of fast money, but only those still standing when the tide goes out can truly be called winners. Looking back over my life, I earned, I lost, and I earned it back again. Wealth came and went like the tide, and the only thing left behind was this pair of hands willing to bend down and work. This is the life of a member of a Wenzhou property speculation team. If you too have once risen and fallen sharply on the wave of an era, you are welcome to comment. Next episode, choose A Shangxi coal mine boss or B a Shenzhen Huiqiangbai stall owner. Vote in the comments. This film is a fictional dramatization for entertainment only.